More than 2,000 years ago, when the world was carved by conquest and ruled by fear, one man rose to challenge the greatest empire of his age. From the burning sands of Africa to the mountains of Italy, his name spread like thunder. Hannibal, the man who vowed to break Rome. And on the wide plains of Cannae, that promise would be fulfilled. Under a sun that turned dust into flame, 86,000 Roman soldiers advanced with the confidence of destiny. They believed victory was certain, that no mortal could stop the legions of Rome. But as the wind shifted and the light struck their eyes, they began to realize they had stepped into the mind of a man who could command the very elements. The earth trembled, the air screamed, and the day turned crimson with blood. It was not merely a battle, but the moment Rome learned the taste of fear, and the world witnessed the birth of a legend. The First Punic War had ended. Roma, the rising republic in the heart of Italia, modern Italy, had claimed victory. And Carthago, the proud Punic city on the coast of North Africa, modern Tunisia, had been brought to its knees. For 23 years, two empires had fought across Mare Nostrum, the great inland sea later known as the Mediterranean. Carthago ruled the western waves with its silver from Hispania, modern Spain, and its fleets of trade ships. Roma, hungering for power, sought to control not only land, but the sea itself. When the war ended, the peace that followed was hollow. Roma stripped Carthago of her ships, demanded gold, and forbade her from defending her own shores. The Punic Empire, once master of commerce and conquest, was left humiliated before the world. But from the ruins of pride rose one man who refused to kneel, Hannibal Barca, the Lion of Carthago, soldier, father, and the embodiment of vengeance. To his weary soldiers, he spoke, "This is not peace. This is only the pause between wars." And at his side stood his son, a boy with fierce, searching eyes, named Hannibal. He was only 9 years old, yet in his heart burned the same fire as his father. One evening, as the crimson sun sank into the sea, Hamilcar brought Hannibal to the temple of Baal Hammon, the great god of Carthago. The air trembled with incense and salt, and the flames danced like the breath of gods. "Hannibal," said Hamilcar, "swear to me. Swear that you will never be a friend to Roma." The boy's gaze fixed on the fire. He saw the legions of Roma marching across the lands of his ancestors. He clenched his fist, placed his small hand upon the altar, and spoke words that would echo through centuries. "I swear, as long as I live, I will hate Roma." The temple fell silent. The gods of Carthago, Baal and Tanit, heard his vow. And far across Mare Nostrum, the gods of Roma stirred uneasily. Years passed. Hamilcar fell in battle, fighting to restore Carthaginian might in Hispania, the rugged land that is now Spain. His son carried the oath like a flame inside his chest. Hannibal became a commander, cunning, disciplined, and fearless. He studied the Roman legions, their formations, their arrogance, their pride. He learned how to break them. From his stronghold at Carthage, modern Cartagena, Spain, he forged an army unlike any the world had seen. Iberian warriors, Celtic tribesmen from Gallia, modern France, and the swift Numidian cavalry from the deserts of North Africa. Every fortress he conquered in Hispania, every victory he won, brought him closer to the heart of Roma itself. At night, under the flickering lamplight, Hannibal would unroll his map of Italia. His finger traced the jagged white peaks that separated him from his destiny, the Alps, the frozen spine of Europa. The Romans believed no army could cross those mountains, but Hannibal smiled. "You built your walls in stone, you raised your mountains in snow, but nothing you build will stand forever." Outside his tent, the wind from Gallia howled across the distant peaks, carrying the scent of winter and war. And far away in the marble halls of Roma, the senators slept in peace, unaware that vengeance was already marching toward them. A vengeance born in Carthage, a storm named Hannibal Barca. Years passed. The boy who once swore vengeance in the temple of Baal Hammon had become a man, and the world had learned to fear his name, Hannibal Barca. Under his command, Carthago rebuilt its strength far from the watchful eyes of Roma. To the north lay Hispania, the vast and rugged land that is now modern Spain, rich with silver, soldiers, and tribes that respected only strength. It was here that Hannibal would forge his army, an army born not of wealth, but of will. At Carthage, New Carthage, modern Cartagena, Spain, the banners of Carthago rose once more above the harbor. Shipbuilders hammered wood and bronze through the long nights. Smiths poured molten iron into spearheads and sword blades. The air rang with the rhythm of rebirth, a city remaking itself for war. Hannibal walked among his soldiers like a shadow. Iberians hardened by the mountains of Hispania, Celtic warriors from Gallia, modern France, and the swift Numidian horsemen from the deserts of North Africa, all sworn to him by loyalty, gold, or awe. He spoke their languages, ate their food, shared their cold fires. He did not rule them through fear. He ruled them through belief. He made them see what he saw, a future where Roma, that arrogant republic across Mare Nostrum, would kneel before Carthaginian steel. By the time Roma realized what was happening in Hispania, it was already too late. A Carthaginian army stood ready, 100,000 strong, bound not by homeland, but by vengeance. Hannibal's first strike came against Saguntum, modern Sagunto, Spain, a city allied to Roma but lying deep within Carthaginian influence. When the people refused to submit, Hannibal surrounded the walls. 8 months of siege followed, fire, famine, and relentless assault. When Saguntum finally fell, its streets burned red beneath the banners of Carthage. To Roma, this was an act of war. To Hannibal, it was the opening move of destiny. In the Senate of Roma, men shouted and pounded their fists on marble. They demanded punishment, demanded Hannibal's surrender. But across the sea in the windswept ports of Carthago, the people cheered his name. He was no longer just the son of Hamilcar. He was the sword of Carthago's vengeance. From the ramparts of Carthage, Hannibal looked north. Beyond Hispania lay Gallia, the land of the fierce tribes, and beyond that, the wall of ice and rock called the Alps. No army had ever crossed those peaks with elephants and siege engines. No general had ever tried, but Hannibal would, because he understood something the Romans never could. That fear is a weapon sharper than any blade, and soon Roma would know its edge. Autumn 218 BC. From Carthage, the heart of Carthago's empire in Hispania, modern Spain, Hannibal Barca began a march that defied reason and gods alike. 90,000 infantry, 12,000 cavalry, 37 war elephants, a living river of men, beasts, and iron, moving north toward vengeance. They crossed the Ebro River, leaving Carthaginian lands behind. Beyond lay Gallia, modern France, a realm of forests, rain, and fierce tribes. The Gauls watched from the trees, faces painted blue, their war horns echoing through the mist. At dawn, one tribe attacked. Hannibal rode forward through the rain, calm as stone. "Hold the line," he shouted. When the Gauls crashed into the shields of his infantry, Numidian cavalry swept from both flanks, curved blades flashing, hooves striking sparks on wet earth. By sunset, the riverbank was silent. The tribes that had come to destroy him now swore allegiance, but the Rhodanus, the Rhone River, still waited ahead, wide, furious, alive. The Gauls had burned the bridges and laughed from the far shore. Hannibal ordered new ones built. For 3 nights, the Carthaginians labored through wind and rain. They cut trees, lashed logs with rope and tar, drove stakes into the mud. By dawn, the river boiled with mist. Drums thundered. The first carts rolled onto the floating bridge. Men shouted. Elephants trumpeted, the boards beneath them groaning. Waves crashed. Ropes snapped. Oxen screamed. An elephant slipped halfway into the current. Soldiers pulled with ropes, shouting prayers to Baal Hammon until the beast climbed back up. From the opposite bank, Gaulish arrows hissed through fog, but Hannibal's slingers answered with whistling stones that cracked helmets, and silence followed. Hours passed. When the final elephant stepped onto the far shore, Hannibal turned to look back at the river. Rain streamed down his face. The gods of Roma had lost their first wager. Yet beyond the Rhone rose the true test, the Alps Montes, the mountains that divided Gallia from Italia, modern France and Italy. Even from miles away, their peaks vanished into cloud. Men stared in awe and dread. The climb began. Snow fell early that year. Each day the air thinned until even breathing hurt. The wind howled like a beast through the passes. Carts shattered on ice. Horses fell screaming into the void. Voi trumpeted in terror, their huge bodies trembling on the narrow ledges. Soldiers marched through sleet with blood on their lips, eyes hollow, armor frozen to their chests. On the 9th day, a rock slide buried the path. Hannibal stood before the mountain, unmoving. Then he gave the order, "Burn it." Fires roared against the stone, heating it until it cracked. Vinegar poured over the flames. Steam exploded skyward. Through fire and smoke, a way reopened. Night and day blurred together. Frost covered faces and hearts. Those who stopped moving were left beneath the snow. The living kept walking, and as the storm thickened, the army disappeared into white nothingness. Men and beasts melting into the snow, their shapes fading until only the sound of marching remained. On the 15th day, the clouds broke. Below them lay Italia, green, golden, alive. The air smelled of pine and wet earth instead of death. Some soldiers wept. Others knelt, touching the soil as if to prove it was real. They had crossed the impossible. Hannibal rode his elephant to the cliff's edge. Cloak torn, eyes burning through exhaustion, he raised his arm toward the southern plains. "There lies our enemy," he said. "You have conquered the mountains. Now conquer Roma." The men roared, their voices echoing across the icy peaks. The March of Madness had become a monument, a scar carved through the roof of the world, and at its end, the shadow of Carthago was falling upon Italia. Winter 218 BC. The snows of the Alps Monte had barely melted when Hannibal's battered army descended into Italia, modern Italy. Behind them lay the corpses of half their comrades. Ahead, the green plains of the Po River, the heart of northern Italia, and the road to Roma itself. Word of his arrival struck Roma like thunder. A foreign army, with elephants, had crossed the Alps. 2 consuls gathered their legions to destroy him. Publius Cornelius Scipio, wounded but proud, and Tiberius Sempronius Longus, reckless and eager for glory. Their plan was simple: trap Hannibal between them. But Hannibal had no intention of being trapped. He feigned retreat, drawing Sempronius northward toward the frozen banks of the Trebia River, modern Trebia, northern Italy. It was perfect ground, open, flat, flanked by marshes and low ridges, the kind of terrain that swallowed the slow and rewarded the cunning. And Hannibal was nothing if not cunning. For days, storms rolled over the valley. Rain turned to sleet, sleet to ice. The Carthaginians camped on the warm side of the river, fires burning through the night. Across the water, Roman soldiers stood soaked, cold and hungry, waiting for the order to attack. Hannibal smiled. He knew exactly when Sempronius would strike, when pride drowned judgment. The trap began before sunrise. Hannibal sent his brother Mago and 2,000 hand-picked men to hide in the tall reeds and frozen marshes behind the Roman position. Then he ordered his cavalry, the Numidians, masters of speed and deception, to ride forward and taunt the Romans. As dawn broke, the Numidian riders galloped close to the Roman lines, shouting insults, hurling javelins, then vanishing into the mist. It was a dance of mockery, and Sempronius took the bait. "Advance!" he roared. 40,000 Romans splashed into the icy Trebia. Water rose to their chests, armor froze to their skin, breath turned to steam. By the time they reached the far bank, their limbs were stiff, their stomachs empty, and their spirits already half broken. And there, waiting in the mist, Hannibal unleashed hell. War elephants charged first, 30 tons of flesh and fury, tusks glinting with bronze. They crashed into the Roman front like living battering rams, sending shields and bodies flying. Behind them came the Iberian and Gallic infantry, screaming war cries that shook the valley. From both flanks, Numidian cavalry swept in fast as the wind, circling, cutting, hurling javelins with deadly precision. Sempronius tried to rally his men, but the mud clung to their legs, and the freezing wind sliced through their armor. The more they fought, the deeper they sank, while Hannibal's soldiers, lighter, faster, and fed, moved like shadows across the field. Then from behind, Mago struck. The ambush exploded from the marshes, 2,000 Carthaginian elites charging into the Roman rear. Trumpets blared, and for a moment, even the elephants seemed to roar with them. The Roman formation buckled, one flank folded, then the other. The Trebia ran red as men slipped and drowned in the freezing water. Those who tried to flee were cut down by Numidian horsemen, their curved blades flashing in the sleet. By noon, it was over. The battlefield was silent except for the wind. 15,000 Romans lay dead. The rest fled south in chaos. Their proud army, frozen and shattered, had been lured and crushed, exactly as Hannibal intended. From his horse, he watched the river run crimson beneath the gray sky. Snow began to fall again, soft and soundless, covering the dead where they lay. For the first time in centuries, Roma had been defeated on her own soil, and as Hannibal dismounted, he looked toward the south, toward Roma, and whispered to the wind, "Father, I have kept my oath." Summer 216 BC. For 2 relentless years after Trebia and Trasimene, Hannibal had cut through Italia, modern Italy, like fire through dry grass, unstoppable, unpredictable, and terrifying. Now, the Republic of Roma gathered all it had, 86,000 soldiers, the largest army it had ever raised, marched south to end him near a small village called Cannae, on the open plains of Apulia. The land was a furnace. The Aufidus River ran low and sluggish. The air shimmered with heat. No trees, no shadows, only dust, wind, and the hum of coming war. For the Romans, it was the perfect place to unleash their legions. For Hannibal, it was the perfect place to bury them. That night he walked the field alone. He studied every grain of sand, every whisper of wind. He crouched, lifted a handful of dust, and let it slip through his fingers. The breeze carried it east, toward the Roman camp. He turned his gaze to the horizon and smiled faintly. At dawn, the sun would rise directly behind his lines, blinding his enemies and filling their ranks with choking dust. He had chosen not only his ground, but his hour. The Romans would march into the light and into his trap. He returned to his tent, drew lines in the sand, and whispered to his captains, "When they come, they will think they are crushing us. But they are only walking into the jaws of death." Before sunrise, the horns of Carthage sounded. Drums rolled across the plain like distant thunder. Hannibal formed his army in a shallow crescent, Gauls and Iberians in the center, African veterans with bronze-edged shields on the flanks and on the wings, the Numidian cavalry, fierce riders from the desert, their horses restless in the dawn light. Across the plain, the Roman legions advanced in endless waves of scarlet and steel. Their standards glimmered in the first blaze of sun. The ground trembled beneath 86,000 marching feet. The wind rose, carrying heat and dust into their faces. Just as Hannibal had foreseen, he raised his arm. The horns screamed. The Battle of Cannae began. The Romans struck the center with crushing force. Shields clashed, spears splintered, the earth shook. Hannibal's front line bent backward, step by step, forming a deep crescent that pulled the Romans inward. The air thickened with dust and screams. Men fought half blind, their faces streaked with sweat and blood. Then came the signal. The flanks moved. African infantry on both sides pivoted inward, their bronze shields gleaming, swords flashing through the haze. From the wings, the Numidian cavalry thundered across the field, breaking the Roman horsemen and sweeping behind the legions. The trap closed. Surrounded from front, rear, and both flanks, the Romans were crushed together, tens of thousands locked in a cage of their own making. The heat was unbearable. The dust turned the air into fog. They could not breathe. They could not move. The living were pinned against the dead. Steel and bone shattered underfoot. The red banners of Roma vanished into chaos. Hannibal rode along the outer ring, his armor streaked with dust, his eyes steady and cold. Every command he gave was short, precise, like the voice of fate itself. Mago pressed from the front, Hasdrubal's cavalry struck from the rear. The Carthaginian circle tightened. The noise faded. The killing did not. By noon, the plain was silent. 86,000 Romans had entered the field. Fewer than 3,000 walked away. The Aufidus River ran dark with blood, its current dragging the fallen toward the sea. When dusk came, the wind shifted north, carrying the stench of death to Roma. The republic that had never bowed had lost an entire generation in a single morning. Hannibal dismounted, standing among the dead. The light of the setting sun turned the dust around him to gold. He looked toward the horizon and whispered, "Today, Rome has bled dry." The plain of Cannae was quiet again. Only the wind moved, whispering through the armor of the fallen. 86,000 Roman soldiers had vanished in a single day. No army in history had ever suffered such a loss. For a moment, it seemed the gods themselves had abandoned Roma. But Roma did not die. The Republic buried its dead and swore vengeance. While the city wept, it began to rebuild, training new legions, forging new weapons, turning grief into iron. Hannibal, meanwhile, stood victorious in southern Italia, modern Italy. The road to Roma lay open before him. His captains urged him to march north, to finish what he had begun, to take the eternal city itself. But Hannibal did not move. His army was exhausted. He had no siege engines, no reinforcements, no supplies. And the Senate of Carthago, jealous, fearful, divided, refused to send aid. He had given them the greatest victory in their history, and they answered him with silence. So Hannibal waited. For 15 years, he lived as a shadow across Italia. He conquered cities, forged alliances, and struck wherever Rome dared to breathe. But time was no longer his ally. Rome had learned from him, his tactics, his patience, his will. And Rome had something Hannibal never truly possessed: endless men, endless iron, and a heart that refused to stop beating. When Scipio Africanus, the young Roman general who had studied Hannibal's every move, brought war to Carthago, modern Tunisia, Hannibal was called home to defend his city. He faced his mirror image, a Roman molded in his own method. At Zama, 202 BC, the two greatest minds of the ancient world met for the first and last time. The battle raged beneath a burning sky. Hannibal's elephants charged, but Roman trumpets screamed and turned them back in panic. His veterans fought like lions, but the Roman line held, disciplined, unyielding, merciless. and at last Hannibal tasted defeat. He returned to Carthago not as a conqueror, but as a man who had seen the future and knew that Rome would one day rule it all. Yet even in defeat, Rome feared his name. Parents whispered it to frighten their children. Generals studied his battles for centuries. No one ever forgot the man who had humbled an empire. Years later, hunted by those who once called him friend, Hannibal wandered in exile through the eastern kingdoms, old, alone, but unbroken. When Roman envoys came to take him alive, he lifted a small vial of poison and smiled. He said, "Let us end this struggle that has lasted too long. Rome will never have me, alive or dead." He drank and lay back beneath the open sky. The man who had crossed the Alps with elephants, who had outwitted empires and defied fate, closed his eyes without regret. And yet he was not gone. His name endured, whispered on battlefields, written in the hearts of every commander who dreamed beyond fear. For centuries, even Rome would honor him, the enemy they could never truly destroy. Because history remembers not just those who conquer, but those who teach the world how to fight. And Hannibal Barca, the man Rome could not kill, taught them all